Good morning. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah Sellers is off. We begin this morning on the road and in the skies, which is where many of you might be heading today. Millions of travelers are on the go, hoping the airlines will cooperate and the weather too, so they can make it home in time for the holidays. AAA predicts about 115 million people will be traveling between December 23rd and January 1st. Airports are already warning passengers to arrive at least 2 hours early to avoid delays. And for those hitting the road, gas prices jumped slightly since the beginning of the month. The national average is sitting just above the $3 a gallon mark. For many, it is still a relief, though, compared to prices earlier this year. We have our team standing by to help you get through the holiday weekend. Angie Lassman's keeping an eye on any weather headaches on the horizon. Travel expert Mark Elwood has tips to navigate travel this weekend. But first, NBC News correspondent Kathy Park is in Atlanta with a look at what we're seeing at the airport. Kathy, good morning. So Atlanta is the nation's busiest airport. This is expected to be the busiest day there before Christmas. What are you seeing, and how early do folks need to get there?
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. Yeah, I guess you could say it's kind of the calm before the storm, because they did a little sweep of the North Terminal here at Hartsfield-Jackson, and so far, so good. I mean, yeah, we definitely see a higher volume today. As you mentioned, it's supposed to be the busiest travel day this holiday season for the busiest airport in the world. Yesterday, they screened roughly 82,000 passengers, and numbers expected to climb a lot higher today. And when you look at the whole holiday season, they're anticipating 3.3 passengers to navigate through this airport. And I did a check on the TSA security checkpoint, just kind of the wait times, and they range anywhere between 10 minutes to 20 minutes, depending on where you enter. And that information is actually accessible online, especially, you know, if you have to head out today, that's probably a good resource to turn to.
Yeah, that's
Joe?
good to check those pre-check times if you have it, because you still might have to wait a few minutes. So what are some of the trouble spots we're seeing around the country? Where are the delays right now?
Yeah, so I did a peek at Misery Map, and it looks like most of the delays right now are kind of centered in the Northeast. Boston, JFK, Newark are seeing some delays, but nationwide, the delays, you know, so far, so good. About 43 at this time, one cancellation. And once again, here in Atlanta, things are running smoothly. But I know a lot of eyes are on the Southwest and in California because we're monitoring the storms there.
And Kathy, remind us, some of us are going to be traveling with gifts for the holidays. So what are the rules and regulations for packing our bags? Can we wrap the gifts beforehand? Should we not? Gift bags, boxes, what do we need to know?
Yeah, so this is something that I learned for the first time this year. So according to TSA officials, it's probably a good idea to bring those gifts in bags, because there's a good chance if those gifts are wrapped, TSA agents, just because of security precautions, then they may have to get to those gifts just to make sure that everything is safe. They might have to unwrap your presents. So if you don't want to kind of lose all of that work that went into making those gifts look really nice, probably just get a gift bag instead so they can just kind of pull it out.
Or have a wrapping party at your final destination. All right, Kathy Park, thank you for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it. Let's get some more tips for holiday travelers with travel expert Mark Elwood. Mark, good morning. Good to see you. So TSA is predicting today will be one of the busiest travel days of the holiday season for folks who are flying. At some airports, it will be the busiest. So what should people know before heading out to the airport to catch their flights?
What I would say is, when we were talking about TSA waiting lines, check your local airport's website, because increasingly airports are offering book a slot. You might be able to book a time to be screened. They want to speed it up too. Remember, the packing is a great tip. Remember the 3-1-1 rule as well. That's 3 ounces of liquid in 1 quart bag, 1 per person. And at the holidays, remember, your snow globe counts as liquid. So if you want to carry a snow globe, it's got to be in your checked luggage, or it's got to be really tiny.
There were just a lot of people at home right now who went, oh, the snow globe. I did not think of that. So that is some good advice there, because you don't want to throw that in the garbage. All right, so Mark, last Christmas we saw that surge in flight delays and cancellations. It was a nightmare for so many, caused by understaffing. We can't forget the debacle over at Southwest Airlines. So how have airlines addressed these issues this year? And another question for travelers, what should they do if their flight is canceled or delayed?
Look, airlines have done their best to ramp back up after the pandemic. There are still staffing shortages. There are air traffic control shortages. We've really just got to cross our fingers. That's the big plan here. What I would remind you is you've got to get in touch with the airline as many ways as you can. Say you're in the Southwest and there are issues. Absolutely stand online at the airport, but get onto social media, ask nicely, get on the phone, because if it's a regional problem, the phone line may well not be as busy as the airport is. You can also try international lines. A lot of the airlines will have calls that you can make, say to the UK, where I am now. There aren't going to be the same issues as the same weather because you're in a different location. That could be a shortcut around the problem.
That is one of my favorite tips from you, Mark, to try the international lines, which may not be as busy as the chaos of the ones here in America. So, Mark, AAA expects 104 million people are actually going to be hitting the road for the holidays. So if you are traveling by car, how do you get your car ready before heading out to make sure you are just totally prepared?
I always say, I think if you're driving somewhere you're less familiar with, I would always download 2 apps that I think are terrific. One is called Gas Buddy. It's a great way of checking prices. You talk about gas prices, they've gone up a little bit. If you want to get the best price in an unfamiliar area, that will help you. I also really like iExit, which is essentially a guide to the freeways. It shows you what is at each exit and what you can expect to find, which really helps if you're in a bind, you need to find a bathroom. Pull that up and it'll give you a much better sense. It's sort of like a magic ball for the future, like a crystal ball.
We could all use that. And when is the best time to leave if you're driving?
Oh, you are a morning person, aren't you, Joe? You work in the morning. You've got to leave early in the morning. Bad news, this is not a time to get a lie-in. If you leave before 10 a.m. most days, you're going to really beat the traffic. So go to bed early. Get up nice and early, say hello to the dawn.
All right, watch a little morning news now and then hit the road. Mark Elwood, good to see you this morning. Have a great holiday weekend. Thanks for joining us.
You too.
No better time than now for your morning news now weather. And if you're traveling west, you might be hitting some stormy weather. Let's bring in meteorologist Angie Lastman with a look at the holiday forecast. Angie, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Joe. You got that right. It's the Southwest that is the bullseye for the potential delays this morning and even into the later parts of today, which we know is a very busy travel day. So here's the deal. We've got this flood watch that's been up. It's going to stay up, and it has moved a little farther to the east, including places in southern Arizona. Phoenix is one of those places. San Diego, Los Angeles, all included in this flood watch as we gear up for more rain today. We've got 26 million people under those flood alerts, and you see the rain is working through this morning into the overnight hours. We had some really heavy rain centered over Los Angeles and points south. We now are starting to see some of that heavier rain working into the Phoenix area, and that's why we say the delays are possible in this region. I think as we get through the day today, a lot of folks are going to start drying out in Southern California. You'll get a bit of a break and you'll see some nicer skies here for you as we get through the next couple of days. But parts of the Southwest, New Mexico, Arizona, you're on tap for the potential for some heavy rain, some flooding as well. And this only gets worse here as we go through the next couple of days for other folks. We do start to see some of the snow falling across portions of the Rockies, but this rain works out into portions of the Central Plains and south. We could see some thunderstorms across parts of Texas. And as we get into Christmas Eve, the travel will be a little wet, not slick, because temperatures just aren't enough for us to see any ice or snow across most of the Midwest and down into portions of the Tennessee Valley and south of that. We'll see the rain, but there will be a little bit of snow, maybe some ice into those northern portions of the plains. That's where we'll watch for potentially a white Christmas, but it'll be a wet couple of days still on tap for folks in the Southwest. These are the areas that you'll want to really watch for the potential for flash flooding. Phoenix, Tucson, all in the bullseye of that, but LA and San Diego included too, with the potential for some flooding of those rivers, creeks, streams. We've got 1 inch to maybe 2 inches. Doesn't sound like a lot if you live in other parts of the country, but of course the desert, picking up a couple inches of rain in a short amount of time can be problematic. How about the snow? If you are looking for a white Christmas, this is where you got to go. Casper, Cheyenne, Denver, Aspen, Durango, all those spots could pick up a good amount of snow. In some spots, especially the higher elevations, it'll be a little better for folks there if they're trying to get on the slopes. We'll have some fresh snow. Otherwise, today, Joe, the east looks great for travel. New York to Tampa, say, or Atlanta. We've got clear skies and, of course, warm temperatures. That's the big takeaway for a lot of folks this holiday weekend and into next week is where's the chilly air? And it is not anywhere to be found. It'll be unusually mild for so many.
We'll just have to enjoy it. All right, Angie, thank you so much.
Of course.
Overseas, at least 14 people were killed in Prague yesterday when a gunman opened fire at a university. Officials say It is the worst mass shooting in the Czech Republic's history. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Keir Simmons tells us more about what happened.
Panic in Prague as a gunman opens fire on a college campus, sending people running for cover. Images of terrified students crouching high up on the ledge of a building, witnesses describing the horror.
In the middle of the exam, we started hearing gunshots and screams. Eventually, we were able to lock the door and make a barricade. While we were walking out, all I could see, on the floor, was just covered in blood.
The gunman opening fire at the arts faculty of Charles University in the city's old town, where police say he killed 14 people in the Czech Republic's worst mass shooting. SWAT teams rushing to the scene. Prague's historic old town, usually packed with holiday tourists, locked down as ambulances and police vehicles pour in. The father of one student says he texted his daughter, telling her to get on the floor and stay away from windows. Police say the suspect is dead, that he likely killed himself after the massacre, but that there was a firefight with responding officers and that they found the body of his father earlier. The White House weighing in.
Federal authorities are in touch with Czech authorities as they investigate this incident, and we stand ready to provide additional support as needed.
Thanks to Keir Simmons for that report. After days of high-stakes negotiations, the United Nations Security Council says it has reached a resolution to get desperately needed aid into Gaza. A UN spokesperson says the deal was reached with the approval of the United States. U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield says that the resolution is one the U.S. can support. That was a major concern among world leaders who were working to avoid another veto from America. It comes as U.S. officials continue to call for de-escalation in Gaza.
Israelis say they, too, recognize the need to transition to a different phase of fighting. They understand, they have said themselves that they realize they're going to have to transition from a higher intensity level of operations, such as what they're doing now, to something a bit lower intensity. They will decide when. They will decide what lower intensity looks like and what that means. We believe that a transition, in the near future is the best possible outcome.
Until that transition comes, Gazans are continuing to feel the impact of the war. Hamas leaders say they will no longer participate in hostage negotiations once a ceasefire is secured. We get the latest from NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter.
Good morning. That's right. We are watching for any news, any hints coming out of the region that those negotiations, those talks towards a pause in the fighting that would also allow more aid into Gaza are moving forward. This morning, the Israeli media kind of stresses that there is a large gap between the two sides, between Hamas that wants a more permanent ceasefire and Israel, which reportedly offered a week-long ceasefire, which was not long enough for Hamas. But the Israeli media reports all this morning stress that they are not at a standstill. Now, inside Israel, there is frustration. Last night, there was a big war cabinet meeting late at night. Protesters gathered outside chanting, "Bring them home." All the people demand that all the hostages return home. But really, the headline is in Gaza today. A ceasefire would bring desperate relief, and a big UN-backed report says 93% of the population is now facing crisis levels of hunger nearing famine. At least 1 in 4 households is facing what they call catastrophic conditions. That's about 500,000 people starving. Now, our team actually spoke with one little girl. She talks about how she waited every morning in very long lines, but sometimes she says, "I wait till the afternoon without any food." Now, the report also underscores the lack of aid coming in. The White House was asked about this yesterday, and John Kirby talked about the challenges. He said, "I wish I could tell you there's some sort of one bottleneck here or there, but there are a bunch of reasons every day." Now, today, we are also watching New York very closely. The U.S. has signaled after a whole week of delays, that UN Security Council resolution vote surrounding a ceasefire. It has been much discussed, may actually go forward today. And the U.S. has signaled they are ready to support what has become watered-down language and watered-down wording with an emphasis on making a pathway for more aid. Now, the UN says that is so crucial right now. 10%, and this is, of course, why there is such a massive starvation crisis. 10% of the food needed to actually get inside Gaza Strip is currently getting inside. We also spoke with the WHO, and they say at this moment there are no working hospitals in the entire Gaza Strip. I'll send it back to you.
All right, Molly, thank you so much. The war is hitting home especially hard for one American family. They live in New Jersey but have deep roots in Gaza. And with each passing day, they're dealing with more heartbreak and an uncertain future. NBC News senior national correspondent Stephanie Gosk brings us their story.
On a suburban street in New Jersey, the pain of a war thousands of miles away is unmistakable.
Tell me about Esma.
Esma, she's a beautiful young lady. Excuse me. Young mother raising 2 kids. Her kids were orphans. I'm sorry.
Mohammed Shahaber has lived in the U.S. for nearly 30 years, but he was born and raised in Gaza. On Monday, the IDF bombed his hometown Sabra. He says this is video of the aftermath.
They hit the neighbor's house next to my father's house. And the walls jumped, and Esma just collapsed.
Dozens of extended family members, he says, including Asma, were in the building.
Is that an area where they thought they would be safe?
Yes, because we've never been bombed by any war before.
Now he believes that many are still buried under the rubble.
You can't even get to them.
You can't. There's no equipment. There's no diesel.
He says more than 100 of his extended family members and friends have been killed in Gaza this week alone. Like much of what is happening there, it is hard to verify the details of Mohammed's story, but the grief is undeniable.
Even the house that it got destroyed, I grew up in it. All my childhood gone. I have no childhood left.
Mohammed and his wife Mona struggle to be hopeful about Gaza's future.
Does a war like this increase support for Hamas?
Yes, unfortunately, it's yes. They're not solving the problem. The Israelis have to stop bombing.
If President Biden was sitting in this chair where I am right now, what would you say to him?
I would beg him, please stop. One phone call, stop it. Mr. Biden, you can do it. He's going to create more problems, more hatred.
Mohammed says living here, he experienced peace for the first time. He worries his family back home will never get that chance. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News.
War is a headline that dominated 2023. The year began with high hopes that Ukraine would launch a successful counteroffensive against Russia, but it ended with that conflict still raging and the Middle East now plunged into war of its own. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel takes a look back at the year of global conflicts.
Ukraine's military this year faced a harsh reality check. Russia fortified its grip on eastern Ukraine and is refusing to let it go. With some of the fiercest fighting taking place in the city of Bakhmut.
Russian forces have now surrounded Bakhmut on 3 sides, and this is the only remaining route in and out of the city that Ukrainian forces can use.
Civilians who remained were driven into underground bunkers without power or heat. Ukraine threw everything it could at Russia in a long-anticipated counteroffensive. The United States backing President Zelensky with weapons and money. Vladimir Putin turning to mercenaries from the Wagner Group, led by his one-time caterer. The mercenaries fought or were shot. And the caterer turned commando, Yevgeny Prigozhin, grew so powerful that he turned against the Kremlin and marched on Moscow before having second thoughts. He died when his plane exploded in midair. U.S. officials believe Putin had him killed. And the war continued, with Ukraine and Russia firing so much artillery, both sides nearly ran out. Zelensky pleading to Washington for more. Putin turning to North Korea's Kim Jong-un. But so far, Ukraine's counteroffensive has accomplished little more than a stalemate. Political support in the United States is now in question.
Several Republican presidential candidates are expressing concerns about support for Ukraine.
Що я можу сказати? А готовий сенатор чи той чи інший кандидат, які вважають, що це дороговартісно для Сполучених Штатів підтримувати Україну, вони готові піти на війну, воювати, відправити своїх дітей, вони готові загинути.
And then Israel had its 9/11. On October 7th, Hamas-led militants stormed Israel from Gaza, killing more than 1,200 people, most of them civilians, and taking 240 hostages, including many women and children. The militants rained fire into Israel.
Stay down, stay down.
Israel responded with a ferocious military assault on the Gaza Strip to root out Hamas for good, flattening entire neighborhoods. President Biden has insisted that the U.S. can and must support two allies at once.
We cannot and will not let terrorists like Hamas and tyrants like Putin win.
The war in Israel brought to the surface long-held pain and anger, with massive pro-Palestinian protests calling for a ceasefire, and pro-Israel demonstrators raising their voices against rising anti-Semitism.
Bring them home.
A week-long ceasefire between Israel and Hamas brought a brief moment of calm and saw more than 100 hostages freed in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. But negotiations collapsed, each side blaming the other. More than 20,000 people have died in Gaza so far, about 70% of them women and children, according to the health ministry run by Hamas. Aid agencies say the 2.3 million people in Gaza are suffering a humanitarian collapse as pressure is mounting on Israel to bring the war to an end. But there's no agreement on who will run Gaza if or when Hamas is defeated. Richard Engel, NBC News.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.